Hey there, it's Paul Phrampus. Let's talk a little bit about where we do our debriefings, debriefing locations. Hi there, my name is Paul Phrampus. I'm the director of Winter Institute for Simulation, Education, and Research, or WISER, at the University of Pittsburgh. I wanted to talk a few minutes about debriefing locations. Sometimes we think that's obvious, sometimes we're very deliberate about it. Some people think that there are special places that you have to debrief, but many of us know there are a multitude of variables that factor into where we're going to debrief, how we're going to debrief, why we're going to debrief there, and so on. So I want to basically talk about two different locations for debriefing, if you will, and that is in the room where the simulation occurred and somewhere else. So let's move on and talk a little bit about aspects of location. Sometimes it's determined by physical space. Some people have to debrief large groups of people at one time, and if you were to only have a tiny little room, then that's not going to work. So the physical space of how many people need to be accommodated, including your faculty members and technicians, if that's what you do at your center, and match it to the physical space that you have available. Many times, debriefing where the debriefing occurred has to do with required technology. In particular, video-assisted debriefing, other sorts of technology that may need to be accessed during the debriefing. Common things like slide projectors, screens, other task trainers, or perhaps the simulator itself. Depending on what is included in your debriefing and your debriefing style can determine where the best place is to do the debriefing. And then lastly, and one of my favorite topics, is the operational decisions. Sometimes that dictates or mandates where you're going to go. You may have to quickly turn over the room where the simulation occurred so another group can go into the simulation, and therefore the best place to do the debriefing is in another room. That might be one possibility, the room turnover. Sometimes there might be great demands on the amount of people you have in your center for a given day, how many people are flowing through, what's the throughput and the volume that is moving through your center, and you might idealize where you conduct your debriefing based on those operational decisions. Next, let's change a little bit and come up with some ideas of where some of the differences lie in whether we're debriefing in the room where the simulation occurred or elsewhere. So at the simulated bedside, there is basically advantages, disadvantages, pros and cons, depending on how you want to look at it, to each of these sessions or each of these choices that we make for our debriefing. If we go to the simulated bedside, for example, so the simulation ends and the faculty or whoever's going to do the debriefing enters the space where the debriefing occurs and begins debriefing. So some of the advantages to that are the equipment's still available in the room. Maybe you, during the debriefing, you want to use some supporting material such as a feature or a finding on the simulator or on the standardized patient, if that's what the simulator was, or if you want to be able to point out something on the monitor screen that the participants were interacting with during the simulation, it makes sense to do it inside the simulated room. Now, this again goes back to the operational requirements I talked about before. That's if you have time and you have the space to keep your simulated room tied up for the debriefing process to go on. Some other advantages of debriefing at the simulated bedside: if you are referring to things in the room that the people just used, the participants just used for their simulation, it might be easier for them to relate or recall something. You may have equipment in the room, such as projectors. You might use the monitor screens and so on as a technology assistance to your debriefing that might be available right in your simulated space. Other things are time. You cut down on the time. Every time that you need to transfer a person or a group of people from one room to another, you lose some time. So if you're on a tight schedule, oftentimes it can be an advantage to debrief at the simulated bedside. Let's look at the downside. or not the downside, but the cons, if you will. Sometimes if a debriefing is very stressful, I mean, if the simulation is very stressful, it could be better to give some space, some psychological space to the participants from where the actual simulation occurred and adjourn to a different place like a debriefing room or some other kind of facility space. The other thing that we talked about already was the operational considerations as a downside of debriefing at the simulated bedside. So another possible thing to think about is a separate room. Separate rooms come in many shapes, many sizes, many forms. Many simulation centers that are purpose-built for simulation have debriefing rooms. These are areas that oftentimes have tables and chairs and computer monitors and video playback capabilities and so on to provide a debriefing space to occur between the faculty members and the participants of the simulation. Other spaces might be a classroom. If you're debriefing large amounts of people all at one time, you may need to go more into a classroom or open theater kind of environment. Each of these spaces, each of these decisions has its own set of pros and cons to it. Many debriefing rooms can be purpose-built with enhanced technology that allows lots of fancy things to be occurring during the debriefing to assist you in your debriefing, or as I said earlier, physical space might be the determining factor. Lastly, just a few minutes on in situ simulation considerations. If you're doing a lot of work with in situ simulations, it's easy to envision where you're going to do the simulation, but make sure you think all the way through to the end of the debriefing so that the logistics are intact. If you are tying up a clinical space, a real clinical space for your in situ simulation, that might be fine. Just make sure that it includes time for the debriefing if you plan on doing it at the same time in that same space. But this is, I think, the ultimate in flexibility in situ simulation. We have to figure these things out sometimes on the fly. Maybe we need to turn this room over so an actual real patient can use it and we need to adjourn to a different room. But the fact of the matter is the debriefing and the success of the debriefing is really that magic that can occur between faculty and debriefers and the students or the participants of the simulation. So no matter where it occurs, as long as it's a good debriefing, it's probably okay. But I do think from a logistics standpoint in situ simulation, many people forget to think about the entire debriefing process when they're planning for their in situ simulations. So that's it for this brief video talking about some of the aspects of how do you consider where to do the debriefing or what are the best locations for your debriefing to occur. Thanks so much, and if you like this video, give us a like. We'd really love you to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you can be alerted every time we come out with a new video from Wiser. So that's it for this one. See you soon. Happy simulating.